Okay. All right. Sorry guys, there was an issue with my Wi-Fi connection. And I have no idea where I ended off in the video's processing, so. We can just make this part 2. Okay. Okay. I was speaking about pretty much this idea that abstract design moves behind your eyes in a universe, in an environment where the laws of external nature don't apply. And it's kind of strange. It's as if consciousness is, or let me tell you what appears through inner consciousness, or let me say it like this. Imagine there's just a spotlight, and this spotlight, when it shines a light externally in one direction, we see infinite design and we see all these designs in accordance to a set of laws. When it goes, let's say, into another side, another direction, the opposite direction that the spotlight goes, this spotlight shows infinite designs, but it doesn't show them set to laws. So what I'm saying is there's always more freedom behind your eyes than in front of your eyes. Or how else would visualization be possible? So there comes a certain advantage with being an ego, the freedom and the malleability of this ego in accordance to the next newest updated vision. Life is, believe it or not, an oscillation between the inner environment and the outer environment. That means I've checked this out. Many days I've tested it. And what it is that you realize either your attention is going to objects or to subjects. Very few people on this planet wonder about what's beyond objects and subjects. Everyone's occupied with them. We're occupied with objects because we require survival and existential continuity. We're obsessed about subjects because we want experiential expansion, and kind of like how a person gets hungry for food, sometimes people get hungry for seeing the way in the world in new ways. And sometimes there is an ancient hunger. It's like a wave that only certain people, they're like antennas receiving, and it is a sort of personal existential curiosity of how even the impersonal can be. You go on your own philosophical journey, and in your own manner, you listen. It's like if you don't abide by who you are, especially when we're talking about metaphysics and the mystical, if you don't abide by who you are, you have gone astray internally. Because most people are looking, it's like you adopt an idea if it has value. The more you think a thought, you are a thought, the more things have to have an exchange, and a sort of dualism must be conducted, must be kept. That means as long as we as a civilization require language, there is no way of escaping good and bad. There's no way of avoiding chaos and order. It will echo in our eyes because in between chaos and order, in the furnaces of time and space, we have been crafted to be the magnificence of the Homo sapiens steps. So in this talk, I'm trying to move the focus, because the way I give these talks is pretty much I'm holding a light on a certain idea, a certain design. And in some sense, when I speak about something, I know this personally. I've written a lot. I kind of realize this through writing, that every sentence changes you. Every action is changing you. If the world underneath our feet was changing too rapidly, those particles were moving much quicker than we were, we could not even see a world. So in some sense, we can say consciousness, if it is tried to be extracted as an element or a particle or a certain process of particles, it will eventually come to, how would I say it? You're going to attribute cause to matter, not realizing that there's space. And so you become a materialistically bound creature. Because there is something that no person in any esoteric environment could have said. Until now, I find. And that is beyond the games of language. Most communities, any sort of community, just pretty much human beings, they're not just running after their physical desires, they're running after ideas. Most people who are trying to work hard to get to something in the future, they have an idea and they want to be it. They want to be their mind, and so their effort has to be conscious and precise. But now there's certain moments where we can't ignore the unconscious. That means there's someone who, like the architect, walks very differently on the bridge than someone who's just a normal passenger. The normal passenger trusts the bridge, but the architect makes sure to see everything is matching what the design was. This is why to be a architect of bridges, usually it's like it either ends careers or it starts. Either the bridge is good or it's bad. Now, the thing is, pretty much what's happening in people's inner reality is they're taking symbology and patterns and shapes from externality and throwing them in their inner space where memories kind of devour it. Or not just memories, like the past and the future are all one phenomenon. The past, present, future, it's all happening in one moment. In one moment, consciousness is even aware that there can be dimensions. So I'm saying that in the search for who we are truly, we're either being pulled towards an existential focus or an experiential focus. Those people who get pulled by the experiential focus will realize that the way they are getting pulled by it is by a sort of coexistence, a symbiosis of their known dimensions with their unknown dimensions. And this is why I say in these talks, you gotta trust life. It's strange, but you gotta do it. Let me tell you why. Because if you don't trust it, your intelligence, your mind won't apply itself. You see, it's like a warrior with his weapon. If he doesn't trust his weapon, it's like, why are you holding it? You know, at least drop it so you can run faster. But if you know how to use the weapon, then you become a being where your inner reality can also change the boundaries of the external. Now the thing is, this great thing that I'm saying is that the ability to acknowledge various rooms, as if when I intuitively early on in my kind of, you can say the logos whispered into my ear that there were consciousness. It's as if not before consciousness, as if like I'm in a room right now here with you in this part of the observable universe and speaking to you right now, like in this podcast and on this earth. But as I'm doing, the way the inner phenomena seems to be organized is that because it is observing externality till the end of day, end of time, till as long as consciousness can have its head above the water, you know. you're studying patterns of intelligence, and you're studying how these patterns of intelligence arise from some sort of inner activity. As you study the inner activity, you realize all of it is just a moment of access. So you see, it's kind of like you are codependent to your world, because if there's no world, where would the self be? You see? So the way our language is structured is innately, there's built in them a care for the external. You know, this is why it's even shown in evidently in laboratory rat psychology, where the rat, they put like this kind of alpha rat and this beta rat kind of in the same thing, this weak and strong rat in the same room, right? And the strong rat constantly defeats in their when they play games and they get bored, defeats the small rat, but realizes that if he doesn't let the small rat win, the small rat won't play. So in some sense, the alpha rat in some sense beats that rat to a point where it's as if hope is not dead. And so this is a very strange concept in philosophy, that sometimes hope is a delay. That means if you're hoping, you're not doing it. It's like things aren't moving forward. In your mind, maybe they are. Maybe that's why there's hope, you know. But in front of your eyes, there's so much left for the world. The world needs to be attended to. Pretty much like it's, imagine like this kind of giant spaceship came and crashed down, you know. And after 4 billion years, this spaceship is equivalent to just civilization. I'm pretty much, that's a metaphor for this thing that's here that we need to attend to, which is the collective sight. Pretty much human beings, our individual activity and our unity will imply a collective being. That means it doesn't matter whether you want to see it through a religious context, a sci-fi context, whatever context, whatever color you want to paint this image, but this is the image that if we work together, we are a collective being. Do you see? And if we are separate and don't work together, the individual will wonder how it's an individual and discover the collective being that way. So our civilization right now is so defined by the individualization of an objective form that it is unfathomable to wonder about a collective kind of mind. And so even we can say some of our greatest engineers are tackling this question, wondering if there ever was a time in history where the human brain could be connected to a computer. How could there be kind of as if, I don't know how the language they would use, but one server to rule them all, you know? So the concept of a collective mind is very interesting because it's just patterns, kind of like leaves being blown in the same direction. You won't find independence, like chaos teaches independence, order teaches dependence, and both are required in life. That means if you can't depend on the world, then you in some sense feel yourself is either beyond the world or it's not being seen by the world. So what do you do with this realization that whatever you see, there's an ability to wonder about it in a different way, and that different way is a subjective phenomenon. Now, here's the cool thing about the mind, that if you were to be as serious like a scientist to study it, you would have to change, you would have to literally, the experiment can't be done in the same way because the laws of evidence are strict externally, but internally they can't be strict. What that means is kind of like how Freud said God was dad. You know, he saw the metaphor of like the father authority figure being also kind of the God that sees all, you know, attends to all. So you see, I'm trying to say it's as if the same idea, the same kind of archetypal core, but the archetypal surface is different. One appears in that narrative, the other appears in another narrative. You know, if you wanna hear more about this, I recommend hearing Jordan Peterson speak about Archetypes, which is, I think, one of his greatest contributions of his overall work. You know, because the thing about the archetype is that these are hidden symbols behind the symbols you're conscious of, and see your mind as a storehouse of endless impressions. That means when I started treating my mind like this, suddenly I realized the fascination of wonder, that sometimes human beings don't need the truth, they just need the most efficient story you can tell them at that time, right? Because the truth can totally be inaccessible. And not just inaccessible, even if it's accessible, what would it mean? It's like the truth is an extreme if we're trying to all be normal, right? So if suddenly a truth came, any sort of truth from whatever story or paradigm, it would in some sense be, how can I tell you? It's like this, the self, before it devours the world before it conquers the world rebels, and before the world conquers the self rebels. What this means is, the moment your external reality tries to change your inner reality, the inner reality tries to be more solid than the outer reality. That means kind of like someone being questioned and them being more, the more you're questioning them, the more angrier they're saying their truth to you. You know? You know, it's like this whole argument that all supervillains, they're not wearing their costumes because they don't want to be recognized. It's just because they're insecure. They don't want to be seen. That's like it. But what it is, I'm trying to say it like certain psychologists have said this, that pretty much the human being clothes itself in ideological design. Now, here's the thing where it gets really interesting. When we hear someone speak, usually, like I've seen a lot of people speak on YouTube, and when I notice that they speak, they tend to speak about an external problem. That means most people go towards, I find, spirituality as a sort of escapist route out of a disharmony. They take something bad that they think that is bad that happens to them, they think it as bad. They literally embrace the image as a loss. Do you know? Sometimes when I really want quick answers to problems, I just close my eyes and imagine, if it was an emergency, if like a meteor was about to hit Earth, what would be the most quickest solution to that problem? Yeah. Urgency, importance. That's the whole point of life. That the creature at first is trying to enter a society that is so vast and underdeveloped that it doesn't even have time to try to help the individual. That means you think the civilization right now in 2019 is structured in a way where it's like the teacher, it's kind of like the teacher student. Okay, citizens are students and the government is the teacher. Okay, so I'm pretty much talking about the teacher-student psychology here when I speak about politics. So check this out. The teacher, you know, can just give the teaching and leave. There's some teachers that are like that, I remember. And the teachers and the students are going to love that teacher if they're ignorant. The students are going to be like, what a great teacher. He doesn't talk. He just writes something on the board. We all write it in our notes for the exam, and that's it. Everybody talks till the end of class to themselves, you know? And let me tell you this, that I had a teacher like this, and he was honestly the coolest and nicest guy ever. But I realized he was not a teacher, probably some dude in financial trouble who had just become a teacher, you know? But the thing was, it was the avoidance of the student, and those teachers become machines. It's kind of tragic, you know. It's when the inner reality of the teacher is more real than the outer reality of the student. You know, you cannot teach anyone if you're still looking at yourself. You know. So here's the thing. Playfully, we add in this moment a hypothetical parallel dimension to the world in 2019. In this hypothetical parallel dimension, there is the opposite of what is going on here. That means I want you to imagine a civilization that is literally the exact opposite of what we are now. I want us to fathom everything that the human beings are doing. You wonder the opposite. And if you wonder the opposite, you would see, because some things are natural and some things are technological, they would all flip. So what that means is suddenly gardening would become robotic, but then, for example, studying technology becomes much more closer to kind of like nature. You know what I mean by what I mean by that is that just you wonder about the opposite, and your mind gets access to a totally different potential of the way that world can be. So what I'm saying is, as you pay attention to the inner design, you realize it is being stretched in accordance to the duality you embrace as the context to where this comes. So you see, it's the novice. I find it's the young mystic. You know, it's like, it's not the mature mystic yet. The young mystic is I mean, I shouldn't say it like this. Let me see if there's a better way I could paint this. If you wonder where your beliefs are, they are in a place where your attention can change how they look to you. That means it's like one thing saying a sentence, but what is occurring behind the eyes of the person is all the ways that that sentence can mean something, you know? The word pun, whoever came up with that word, in that moment, that was an evolutionary leap for the psychology of man. Language suddenly could be seen in another way. Right? So I'm telling you, even if you go look up a word in a dictionary, you're going to see it has multiple definitions. So language is a multidimensional thing. Do you see? So we require language to have this individual be able to journey through various modes. It's as if the human mind is kind of like how the cosmos was working on character development. Something like that, you know. Evolution is the character development of the cosmos, you know. The unknown is magnificent because knowledge can't touch it. Knowledge can't touch it. It's the glitch in the matrix of the past. And you might not believe it, but we are not the objective data or the subjective data. This is why we have the free will to move and change. That means you can only have free will if there is something to have free will. And the whole multidimensional perspective of man, how you look at a word and it has a bunch of meanings. In other words, you're looking at reality and realizing different ways it can stretch behind your eyes. And this relationship with the inner reality and the outer reality, in ancient times, the inner reality was sacred. Nowadays, nobody cares about the inner reality. We believe we're objects that are hallucinating consciousness. How magnificent, you know. We're the hallucination of electrons, you know. Like, what a rewarding story to live as a temporary being as, you know. Life has to you have to experience the creative dimension. That means in this life, it's impossible to go through life without experiencing a creative dimension, a destructive dimension, and a changing dimension. The changing dimension is the peak of the two edges of creation and destruction. So eventually the mystic will realize it's kind of like you're moving from the number 2 to the number 1 to the number 0. So your inner structure of how there's duality for language suddenly comes to a singular. And when you look at religion, it's pretty much people realizing there's a singular truth beyond conception, right? So in some sense, you can say religions were attempts to keep people not enslaved by certain languages, but also eventually through time the limitation becomes this. It's like you can't be in one design. It's like you can't just stand one place in this life and expect like nothing to happen. You have to be active. You have to engage. And in order to engage, you got to be an individual at first. But after being an individual, after living a lifetime, you'll be like, okay, what else is there? And then you realize that there's subjective phenomena. As if there's two dimensions being your same moment of being. There's the objective component. I mean, I emphasize this a lot, guys, but the reason I constantly try to shatter the image is because there is, how can I tell you? What I've understood from literature is that pure literature doesn't care for doesn't care. It's like the person is using language not in accordance to past structures, but in accordance to the movie of their mind. What that means is like, for me, language is not the first way the thought that I say to you is caused. You see, it's like a field. It's like when you look at a finished painting, you know, and somehow you could go back in time and in the middle of the painting when the artist was drawing it, you could see where the artist was going, you know. You could know a bit of the world as truth, but you know, the eyes change. I tried believing things when I was younger. Doesn't work. Because belief is linguistically oriented. The issue is you can't be a pure believer. That's the issue. And whatever it is, it's like regardless, the future generations have some sort of self-pride. So whatever mistakes humanity made when the children of the future generations are born, they're just going to accept it. They're going to accept like, okay, this is a good world. It's like they don't know all about all the corruption in the past, but from the moment they open their eyes, the world is something enough for them to do something about. So this inner design. This inner design sometimes comes with purpose. That means it's like literally I'm speaking to you as a person who has realized the mind is not an object. It is an awareness, and how we define awareness is literally this spherical, endless kind of view and, you know, sensitivity you have to how phenomena is here. Man's mind is so able that, like, you see a young child make a teddy bear into its best friend, like a really young child. Children play with toys because they're playing with their mind. They're bringing their mind to life in some way. Now, psychological, there are certain cultures and societies it's kind of strange. It's as if if ideology was like this bewildered beast, it's bitten into certain cultures more than the rest. And what it means is that the personalities that lead, they define, it's literally their free will that is defining law. So in some sense, the world takes the shape of their mind, kind of how gods looked at mortals, and they in some sense knew man was moving in accordance to their vision. So it's as if kind of like how thoughts, we are the god of our thoughts. Similarly, it's as if manifestation is the thought of God. You know, eventually it will come down to something like this, I think. What it would mean is eventually you cannot ignore dissolution. So think about it. Your biological body when life reaches a sort of transitory point, it ends. The heart, you literally are like, all right, heart, you can rest now. You know? You reach a point like that. You know, you liberate your physical existence for their action. You know, all, your elemental existence. You pretty much before you transition, before you step out of the room of manifestation, you simply honor elemental existence. I don't know how to say it, but it's hear these very playfully, but I'm trying to share, I'm trying to speak about, like I'm trying to walk into a different part about the abstract universe. I can say survival is all about keeping a certain memory alive in the cosmos. It is survival of the self originated value. Behind your eyes, let's start from there. You're paying attention to how, let's say somebody asks you who you are and you write that sentence down. Like if you could do that for a second, just pause the talk, get a piece of paper, and just ask yourself in a sentence, in this moment, who would you be? And just write in that sentence who you are, just one sentence. Write it on a piece of paper and that's it. Literally your quick instant answer to who you think you are in this moment. Just write. Now, that sentence on that piece of paper, the reason I told you to write it is because I want to keep that as a subjective checkpoint. So I want you to see that sentence as ink on a piece of paper, but when you see it, it has a subjective image that comes to you. It has a subjective meaning. That means ink on a piece of paper can evoke worlds behind the eyes of man. This is why people love reading, you know. Now, so that checkpoint habit. So let's start from here, that we're paying attention to abstract design, and as I explained earlier in the talk, in part one of this, before my Wi-Fi kind of changed worlds. This abstract design has a freedom. Now, I've asked myself, why is it that I can so easily imagine any object in the room just hover in the air? Why can my mind, and I find any human being's mind can do this, just look at an object and just wonder what it would be like if it was floating in the air, right? So you can imagine that. So I've asked myself, all right, now that image of that object floating in the air, where is it? What is it? I've tried to pinpoint like that. You know, I've taken the hunter-gatherer evolution, kind of like the hunter, let's say, evolutionary mindset of taking a spear, focusing on one point and just kind of like pinpointing it. So similarly, I've tried to pinpoint the core, honest presence of my subjectivity. So anyways, now let's pay attention to this checkpoint. So here's the landscape again, just to repaint it. This talk's actually getting me excited, you know. We find ourselves in a moment of being. Pretty much we're creatures on the surface of a pebble in space, in a light beam. Now these creatures are wondering about the nature of language behind their eyes, therefore dualistic dimension, and the mind externally as a, how can I say, as an object makes itself into a subject. That's kind of like you writing that sentence, you know. when an object makes itself into a subject, because the objective changes slower than the subjectivity, you have to believe that you are a certain thought. You have no choice, you know, until you sleep, and then you wake up, and so many people don't realize how many times every morning you wake up, you're a new being. Literally, you can choose to hold on to the past, but the past has lived its life and, you know, died honorably. I remember someone once said, as you observe subjective phenomena, it has a freedom where it's as if there aren't any laws of the universe behind the subjective phenomena unless you put it there. So the subjective phenomena has a freedom. So actually, your thoughts are less dualistic than how you interpret them. So what I mean by that is that it's like literally from the objective, we're trying to see what the subjective is, and we see that the subjective is not physical, but it is visible. It is design-wise existent. That means when you imagine that object hovering in space, like just like let's say just hovering in the air a couple feet, that image, that visualization, that design is there. It's kind of like you having a dream and remembering it. It's too mysterious. It's like, what the hell are our educational systems doing? Like, seriously, what the hell are they doing? This human design is so fascinating and mysterious that what are they teaching? How can they teach? It's like they don't need to teach. They just need to unleash explorers into domains of intellect, into various ways that man has seen knowledge branch out. That's why we say the branches of knowledge. That's why I think this is more in towards Kabbalistic thought, but there's the tree of life, and the tree of life, for some people they saw a tree like they saw the tree they had back in their backyard, but for some people they saw the tree of life as the whole dimension of all reality. So it's as if we are in a tiny percentage of an incredibly multidimensional place, but we don't even realize it, and we're not even trying to believe into it. It's like we have stopped asking questions. So what it is, let me tell you what the issue is. The issue in our educational systems is that the voice of the professors has not been louder than the voice of the financial advisors. And what that means is that we are not teaching the children of this world for the sake of wanting to know how the world works. We're teaching them pretty much, we're like, okay, you survive that way, run that way, like implementation of it. That means I find that the educational system should infuse with the workspace. I think it will, but I don't think now. Maybe in like, I don't know, 80 years, one person is going to be like, yo, maybe we should do this. Domain, but because you see some chaos external to you, you automatically think you're ordered. Like that has happened too. So what I'm saying is that the internal phenomena can define you if you want to worship it, you know? But I feel it's like the era of ideal worship is going to end. Hopefully it's going to end. All wars, everything is that it's the cause is ideal worship. Because what the subjective phenomena, we can't just be chill about it and realize it's like a seasonal cyclical thing, you know? Many Zen masters have said, literally, it's like the external reflects the internal, but the internal, through the intersection of consciousness, has an ability to totally shift the external. So what happens is when we get too many mysteries, the whole world has to change. Now, this doesn't mean all of reality. It just means the immediate consciousness asking the question has to return back to its neutral independence. Excuse me. The inner reality, the more you wonder about it in regards to the eyes of the character, the more life will become a personal truth for you. So what I mean by that is that the inner reality should not be an answer for you, it should just be a question. Through different energetic levels of the moment, it's kind of intuitively decided whether you go more on the observer side of the moment or you go into the action and the engagement of it. We can say the reason even the words extroversion, introversion has been in some sense created is because human beings are paying attention ultimately to different values. So when 8 billion people try to work together to kind of build a civilization, it's like there has to be like a common denominator or they are not seeing the same thing. I find anything you pay attention to enough, eventually you'll be inspired to act. To be a creature that doesn't respond to data means being able to be a moment of being that is the observer of the attribute. So when we look at external environment, laws of nature win. When we look at the inner environment, it's like a black abyss. And in this black abyss, there is an unknown freedom. As if thought can move in different directions. It can animate in accordance to a sort of wave pattern of your memory. Like you can kind of like change the context of a whole moment by by moving your attention into another moment. You know, you can totally, like, this is the issue with listening, is because the person wants to be somewhere else. And the moment you want to be somewhere else, you're not where you are. This is kind of like where too much of a success kind of obsessed driven mindset will make you into a machine. You will stop hearing. It's like, I'll tell you, there's a kind of karma moves in many ways, let's say. Karma is like weather, let's say. But there are certain times where tornadoes can come. And when gentleness reduces in the environment, that's where there's two dangers. Either a return to the de-evolved animalistic savage violence and instinct, or the mechanization, let's say, the how you will either become a machine, or you will become a savage animal. So you have to realize the greatest asset you own, the greatest thing you have as a being, is your attention. There's nothing more divine than your attention. Every idea in this world bows to the attention of the human being, because without the attention, the idea doesn't exist. But when a person feels they're less inferior to an idea, they, in some sense, they become defined by the idea. This is why so many people in history you see, it's like kind of important lesson in politics, that it's like the rebellion becomes successful, and the new people who come in power eventually make the same mistakes, because the new people have been fighting the enemy, not realizing the enemy was the imposition of their mind. It was a subconscious archetype. This is why kind of like forgiveness was a saintly act, because it literally meant that the person's subconscious was seeing more out of the world rather than an obsessive equating of things. Because when you bring laws into place, then that's an allowance of intensity. You're putting something there to be engaged. I don't know how to say it. This abstract design behind your eyes, it will be kept by attention, then it will suddenly be taken by rhythm. That rhythm would be a strange intuitive trust in the phenomenology of the moment, so you're literally just standing there and watching how your mind is moving, you know? And you begin to see how thoughts appear And then as they come and go, you eventually discover the texture. So eventually all the different thoughts you've had in your life has kind of been like your hand trying to find a wall in a dark room to kind of see what is this true meaning of reality. I find that the way civilization is designed, I gotta say this, the way civilization is designed in 2019, human beings, probably many or everyone, has internal resistance. What that means is they have tried to find a bunker of an ideological self, and in that ideological self, they're ridiculing the world to be a sort of individual. But let me tell you, it's kind of like what the world needs is minds opening, and as minds open, newer options come into view, then the possibility increases. And how can I tell you? It's like we don't need to expect too much from the future, but we need to embrace the novelty of the kind of like what's in front of us now. Now, I find geometry is really important to consider in regards to visualization. I'm going to use the word visualization because that's the closest word to the idea I want to say. But really, how you should treat your attention is that there is an unknown presence and there is a known personality. This unknown presence is how energy is being aware that it's a personality, how it's being aware it is using language. This simplistic awareness, it surpasses language. So language is suddenly becomes a technology at that point. When you get really close to getting moving beyond the language threshold, when you look down, what you see is endless technologies. Literally the freedom, excuse me, the freedom of language, how language can move at that point when you're getting ready to move beyond, the language threshold, the atmosphere. You'll reach a point where the freedom for thought to move can become so much where you'll see you can, how would I say it? Just like how in quantum physics the electron is in two is like in two different electrons are in this, I don't know how to say it. There's a viewpoint in let us say in quantum physics just to be safe. That the same electron can be in two different places at once. A sort of simultaneity of spontaneous existence. This simultaneity of spontaneous existence, it is there also for the inner subjective landscape, your subtler planes. And so when you acknowledge yourself as a pilot, what it means is you have realized this life is meant to live with your attention to things. And your attention really activates you. Because if your attention is on the future, you're doing nothing now. If your attention is on the past, you're doing nothing now. Only when your attention is to how the world is held now. Somebody wanted freedom. He's like, man, I want freedom. And somebody came back and said, what do you want freedom from? And the person thought about it and realized eventually when you reverse engineer, back to a point where we couldn't even speak about the world. Silence held it all, and categories hadn't even been fathomed yet. some have called it the hidden cities. Sorry, the cities of the hidden mind. The ability to see an attempted infinite change. That means when you see, like if you were to put two mirrors in front of one another and you stood in front of it, you would see a sort of optical illusion of an infinite reflection. So you can say in that moment where you're seeing the optical illusion of the infinite reflection, the mind is attempting infinity. The mind, whatever it's generating, is trying to be infinite, trying to contemplate in that instant infinity. So in that instant, what happens is the mind, once it sees, it leads to the unknown. So it's kind of like the child is born from the unknown into the known, and it suddenly, eventually, at some point realizes that the world is so vast and unknown that its knowledge realizes its edge and treats itself in accordance to its experience, not in accordance to its held strict belief. A belief is just a vehicle, you know? It's a means of communication. This inner phenomena, if you were to imagine, for example, let's say a golden hula hoop that's glowing, you know, and excuse me, and you imagine this hula hoop, this kind of circle, to start spinning. Imagine you imagining just, okay, let's say even that object you saw, like I asked you to visualize as if it was hovering in the air. Now visualize it as if it's moving so fast that it's kind of like if that circle is becoming a sphere. So that moment where your imagination is attempting infinity is a moment to really observe. And the best way that mystics did it was they would sit still and silent. And they would watch first, and then what they watched and how the world moved and how nature moved, then their inspiration came. That means some people are running into life. Some people are kind of first waiting there to listen to the commands of nature and then move. Because ultimately, if you don't give freedom to the unknown, you haven't given freedom to the known. That means unless you get, it's like if you haven't given the illusion a valid point of existence, you can't give the truth a valid point of existence. The concept of truth emerges when the fades when the concept of an illusion fades as well. It's like I sometimes thought about it. It's like the same kind of question someone may have is like if the world was a simulation, so let's say we got out of the simulation, well, where would we be? We would be another reality, and then how else would we be sure of that reality? So there is no way to be certain about phenomena that has spontaneously opened its eyes here. Certainty and rationality are tools, methods, I find, kind of like various lenses you can change on your camera, put on your camera of perception. But it doesn't mean just the viewpoint has to define the whole life of the person. Sometimes it's you gotta take off your sunglasses at night, you know. Especially if you're trying to see the stars, you know. I want us to think that if 8 billion people had everything they ever wanted, some sort of comfort, and it's like they were surviving in the fittest way, everybody, 8 billion people, what would their minds generate in that kind of society? And I see that freedom that their minds would have when, if they had all their physical desires, they could have instantly given it whether they had their physical desires met or not. That's what I'm saying. Free your mind before you try to free matter. The mind is a return to the free will. The free will is a presence of attention. The presence of attention oscillates in accordance to different hemispheres of the brain through going towards endless creation or endless destruction. That's it. We've defined creation as order. We've defined destruction as chaos. Yet it's all language in the air. What is really there is the presence, how the energetic existence is being a sort of personalized subjective experiencer. Kind of how Rene Descartes, this French philosopher, he brought up this concept of the mind and body's dualism. He thought the body was in its own dimension and the mind was in its own dimension. You know, and he kind of came into this conclusion because he had this approach of doubting everything. It was like a methodical doubt. So he started doubting everything. He's like, okay, I doubt this, I doubt that, da, 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 da. As if doubt was a machine gun he was shooting everything with, you know? And so eventually he realized something he couldn't shoot with the machine gun was the machine gun. He couldn't shoot the doubter. He couldn't doubt the doubter. And so when he realized he couldn't doubt the doubter, he realized it as if that was the isolated thinking subject that was the presence of the mind. He saw his personality as the dimension of the mind, kind of different from the body. He saw like he right now on Earth, how it's going on. It's like we're owning thoughts as matter. We're trying to pull subjectivity, and every time we want evidence, we have to make sure subjectivity is material first. You know, it's as if the same approach that we're having to somebody who wants to study like the ingredients of a cake. Or somebody wants to study like how a sort of crystal is made in nature. You can't have the same approach in regards to subjective phenomena. You can't hold it. You can't put thought in a cage and then say this is thought. It's more rhythmic and natural, therefore being automatically beyond the language threshold. I've realized the civilization's mind will stay locked until every human being wonders about their relationship with language and their relationship with how language is being the limits of their world. And it doesn't matter if you meditate, it doesn't matter if you know, there's some people in the Amazons taking like ayahuasca, drinking like this like leaf juice. You know. I should of course be way more respectful than this. Ayahuasca and the shamanic approach is very it's another path towards enlightenment, you can say. You gotta really we have to preserve not just nature, we have to also preserve behaviors with nature that human beings had. You can say the shamans of the Amazons had a sort of intimacy with the natural world that any other sort of tradition kind of that was away from the secrets of the forest did not have access to. Because literally the energy is different. Like you gotta notice, like when you walk into a building and when you walk in a park, they're totally different. Literally, you feel, I don't know, but if you're sensitive, you'll literally realize you're stepping into a moment where how the particles are moving are different. How the space is being a sort of projection of matter. And here's the chaotic thing. How can we accept that we're material beings when matter is being defined as lifeless or hallucinatory life, filled with life? I'm telling you It's strange. We can try. It's kind of like the same as trying to find the philosopher's stone. Trying to find, or as the alchemists would say, the elixir of life. A sort of solution to the Rubik's Cube of this random design of a temporary reality. The Buddhists kind of saw it as trying to get step out of the wheel of karma. And so the only way you can step out of the wheel of karma is realize the center of the wheel doesn't move. The center is your mind. Your mind is your moment. Therefore, how the moment is standing is another way of saying how thought is existing for you. So your inner reality is really sensitive. And so any sort of external engagement can direct your attention away from thought. But thought is there, but it's in its own subtle room, you know? And so we're just acknowledging this in the sense that the mind has to attempt something new. Like that's the point of having minds. That's the point of having a unique DNA, you know? Something like it should be written on every person's resume, but civilization doesn't acknowledge this now, is that, okay, I have this unique DNA that survived 4 billion years to be here, allow me to attempt, you know, like, give that. Intelligence. It is not in language. It can't just be defined by language. It is not just the response. Intelligence is not just the response. There's a person named Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj. He says, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. So when he says that, he means like, when he realizes life is inevitable, void, and empty, and literally this material composition decomposes and consciousness disappears, as the current impression is, he's like, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. Literally, the observer is accepting a more accurate, refined vision of the world as it sees it, where it's changing toward. So the first part, he says, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. The second part, he says, when I see that I am everything, that is love. That's what he says. And what he means that literally when he realizes he is all, imagine every emotional, as Maslow would say, a sort of emotional need that the human being has to kind of feel as if it is a participant in some sort of journey of existential value. The sages said you can do two things in life. You can either trust it or not trust it. And if you distrust it, you have distrusted your mind. If you trust it, you have trusted your mind. The inner reality will be observed. Eventually, the relationship with the unconscious will be, that means the consciousness transforms the way it has a relationship with the unconscious in a way where the unconscious begins moving the conscious. Now, when the unconscious begins to moving the conscious, it's kind of strange because the ego is so inferior as being such a hollow thought that the moment its desire is met, it vanishes. That means who you are when you want something, the moment you get it, you stop caring about who that person was. The desire is like the heaven you entered, and now the heaven is not earth, so you forget about earth, you know? You know, it's as if Here's a playful story I can animate right now. A man looked at the heavens on earth and he shouted at God. He shouted at the sky, the endless sky. And he shouted and he said, "Why have you made me?" And there was silence, pure silence, a silence as if every celestial object in the visible, observable universe was quietly just listening. No response came, no voice of God was heard. The man stood silently staring at the sky, but suddenly he heard a voice. He heard a voice, and the voice was muffled. And he listened and he realized the voice was coming from the center of the earth. And it was the voice of the earth, as if God wasn't speaking to him now, the planet was. And the planet was only saying, build, build, build. 3 words. And what, in some sense, another suggestion that the purpose of life is conscious activity with an awareness of the rhythmic presence of intelligence. If you're afraid of the world, you'll become its guardian. If you enjoy the world, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love. And in between, my life moves. When Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj said that, it was as if his intelligence is oscillating between being everything and nothing at the same time. I have this theory that kind of when you look at a caterpillar and you look at how a caterpillar, it's like a creature that's designed to walk. You know, it's all its legs can testify. It's a creature that is definitely a way to experience movement, you know. And when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, it suddenly becomes a totally different creature and starts experiencing the sky and space. You know, it's as if first there's coming an awareness to a 2-dimensional movement, then it's coming an awareness into movement into 3D. Literally, a caterpillar turning into a butterfly is a creature's attention transforming into an exploration of a higher dimension. So nature's automatically, the being is transforming endlessly into something. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, so let's just be playful and say if there was, let's say, we were gazing through the eyes of a Japanese Shinto person, Shintoist, if I can say that. We would see that it's as if the consciousness, let's say playfully, the soul of that caterpillar, the soul came and experienced the journey of being a caterpillar, then jumped into the opposite. And I was like one day playfully thinking, okay, let's just take this metaphor and wonder if we are right now in existing as individuals in a world. It's as if we were going to evolve similar to the caterpillar, it would be as if we would be the world in the individual. So kind of like we are bodies in on minds, yeah, like in minds, but then we become minds in bodies. And I'm not sure how to explain this, but I'm just saying it's kind of like looking at nature and realizing it plays with opposites. So kind of like there's many dualities. Some of these dualities are covered up. Like I need paper to draw this, but it would be kind of like like uh, like it'd be like a curved line, and each with endless kind of like horizontal lines going through it. I don't know how to say it, but it's as the Diamond Sutra says, keep your mind alive and free without abiding in anywhere or anything. That means most people are a result of intelligence. This is kind of telling you to be a cause of intelligence. That is the only freedom. You have to use your free will, and in accordance to how much you contemplate and how much you have wondered about where your true intelligence is, you will kind of be gravitated towards where you're going. And nature kind of sings its song as history is written. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I might do a part 3 to this, but maybe not. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and awesome.